Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the JLI Facebook Live, broadcasting live here from Pasadena, California. We've got 10 and 20, the 10 Commandments in 20 minutes. I want to begin by setting the stage, give you a little rundown as to what life was like to some degree, some 3,300 plus years ago. So you have a couple million people who have just left Egypt, had a really rough time living there for a couple hundred years under severe and very harsh conditions of slavery, etc., 210 years to be exact. And they finally arrived at this given moment, the greatest experience that the world has ever had. So you have, based on the numbers we understand, as I mentioned, about 3 million people, 600,000 men between the ages of 20 and 60, plus the women, the children, the teenagers. You got to figure 3 million is probably a pretty close number, give or take. They're all standing and getting ready for the greatest event to ever hit the world at the foot of Mount Sinai. So tomorrow, the first day of Shavuot in the Torah reading, we read from the book of Exodus, chapter 19, where it says, in the third month, when the after the exodus of the children of Israel from the land of Egypt, on that day they came to the wilderness of Sinai, and basically the Jews or Israel encamped before the mountain. So the terminology that's used here is Vayichan Sham Yisrael Neged Ahar, that the Jews encamped in the singular in front of the mountain. Now, typically speaking, when the Torah tells us about the Jewish people at large as a group, it uses a plural. Vayachanu, when they encamped. Vayisa'u, when they traveled. Here it uses the singular Vayichan, literally, and he encamped. Why is that? When you have millions of people, grammatically, this seems to be incorrect. So as a rule of thumb, when you have many people, in this case, millions of people, there are obviously going to be dissenting opinions. But when it came to the Jews receiving the Torah, our sages tell us it was ki ish echad b'lev echad, like one man with one heart, one mind, one opinion. Now, granted, it's probably the only time in history where the Jews all agreed and were all of the same opinion, but nonetheless, at least it happened once. There's potential for it happening again. Why was Torah given to us? So the Rambam Maimonides explains that the Torah was given to bring peace to the world. And therefore, the Jews encamped by Mount Sinai, or their encampment by Mount Sinai, brought about a complete unity and a complete absence of discord. And with God's help, something to be replayed once again very soon with the coming of Mashiach. So now it happens. Here you have the millions of Jews all encamped there with one frame of mind, on one page. Everybody's happy and getting along with each other. And then all of a sudden, there's this booming voice that comes forth from Mount Sinai. Now, there's thunder, there's lightning, the theatrics are amazing, something that can't be replicated once again, even with the best of studios. So what ends up happening is that God gives us the Torah. We have this booming voice coming forth with the 10 Commandments. And as we were told, it was called God of La Yosef. It was basically a voice that continued and did not cease. It didn't end, which means, simply speaking, that there was no echo. Typically speaking, if you have this booming voice coming forth in a mountainous area, there were other mountains in the Sinai. So, as we well know, a voice will bounce off the various mountainous ranges. It will bounce off the stone. Anything which is dense enough, it will bounce off. And here there was no echo. Why was there no echo? So the answer is because every element of creation was permeated by God. Because God's quintessential essence was revealed at the giving of the Torah, nothing at all was impervious to this revelation, and it infused every element of creation, even the grossest of corporeal matters, with godliness. And that godliness that's been infused into every element of creation, be it animate or inanimate, is something which remains eternal. That's what it means when it says that the voice never ended, it never ceased, because God's voice, God's proclaimment of the 10 Commandments, etc., remain for all eternity in every element of creation. On Shavuot, there are actually a number of events that took place. Number one, as we all probably know, it is Kabbalah Satorah. It commemorates 3,332 years ago. It commemorates the event of, God giving us the 10 Commandments. But it also happens to be the yahrzeit, commemorates the day of passing of King David HaMelech, as well as the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism. Who is King David? David was the first ruler over the entire over the whole of Israel. And in turn, the dynasty of the Jewish kingdom was given to him in perpetuity. In other words, that Mashiach is going to be a direct descendant of King David, and thus the lineage of Malchus, of sovereignty, remains remains in his line, family line. What was now obviously the fact that the yahrzeit of King David and the Baal Shem Tov falling out on Shavuot is not by accident. We know that everything in this world is by divine providence, by Hashgacha Pratit. So what connection could there be between King David, the Baal Shem Tov, and that of Shavuot? And I won't belabor the point, but in short, King David brought about, as he was the first monarch, he brought about this element of what's in Hebrew known as Tachtonim Yalu Le'Elyonim. But prior to the giving of the Ten Commandments, godliness to a large degree couldn't come down and be manifest in the physical world. That all changed when God gave us the Torah and he allowed godliness to come down and be manifest within physical items, thus enabling us to perform mitzvot with corporeal and physical matter. King David, ultimately, as the first ruler of Israel, brought about, sort of sense, the ascent of the lower, we, the Jewish people, by becoming nullified to the king. The king, in this case, was King David, but also allegorically, is referring to God. So by our having bittul, self-abnegation, nullification towards the king and towards God, ultimately, we are elevating ourselves and thus connecting to God. The Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism, brought the teachings of the mystical to a whole different level for us through the teachings of Hasidut in more, I guess, contemporary times, through Chabad teachings of Hasidus, through Tanya and the like. As the famous story goes, of the Baal Shem Tov, that he ascended to the heavenly or celestial abode of Elijah the prophet and asked him, Master, when are you going to come to herald in the coming of Mashiach? And the answer, that when the wellsprings of your teachings, the teachings of Hasidus, will be spread throughout the entire world, Mashiach will come. Thus, in essence, helping to bring to fruition the whole purpose of the giving of the Torah. So going back to the Jews, let's go back to the Sinai desert 3,300 plus years ago. How did the Jews prepare themselves for the giving of the Torah? You got to remember, here's the greatest event in their lives, the greatest event to ever hit the world. So obviously, there's got to be some anxiety. There's got to be tension. Jews are very good at being anxious people and having, a little nervous, as they call them, nervous. So obviously, there's got to be this anxiety, this tension going on before this great event. God's going to reveal himself on a mountain to the Jewish people. You would think that if it's the greatest event in your life that's going to happen tomorrow morning, you'd have a heck of a time trying to sleep the night before. What do our sages tell us the Jews did? They went to sleep. Not only did they sleep, but it's explained they had a sweet sleep and a short night. And to the extent that the desert flies, which are like a biting fly, which normally would bother people in a desert, didn't bother the Jews at all. So frankly speaking, their sleep, quote unquote, was more of a supernatural sleep. It was uncommon or unusual to be able to sleep that way in a desert, all the more so before this great event that's going to happen in the morning. So what were they thinking? I mean, hello, guys. God's going to reveal himself to you. He took you out of Egypt. Life's going to be great. We're going to go to the land of Israel. I mean, everything's going to be fantastic. How in the world you go to sleep? So the answer, simply speaking, according to Hasidus, is as such. It's explained that when a person goes to sleep at night, most of their soul ascends back to God and gives basically a full report of your daily activities. And part of it remains down here in the physical body, and with God's help, is reunited with the rest of the soul in the morning when you wake up. The Jews, wanting to experience the giving of the Torah on the most spiritual level possible, figured what better way to prepare themselves for this great spiritual revelation than to go to sleep at night, where my soul can go to a much higher plateau. It's not going to have the limitations of the physical world, the physical body, as it normally does. And God should be happy. I want to get into the mode. I want to get into the proper frame of mind. Apparently, God wasn't too excited about the whole thing. Why? Even though their intentions were good, but God wanted to give the Torah specifically to physical people in a physical world, in physical bodies, corporeal bodies, and not to some celestial beings above. Not to the angels, who also had a whole argument. They wanted the Torah. God wanted to give it to us as waking and conscious individuals. And hence, thousands of years later, we still stay up the entire night of Shavuot studying Torah to kind of make up for that little faux pas. So we're back to Sinai. We wake up in the morning. It's time for Matan Torah, time for the giving of the Torah. As I said before, there's all kinds of theatrics. There's thundering, there's lightning, there's smoke, there's booming voices, etc. In fact, Rashi explains to us, in the words of the famous Rabbi Akiva, that the Jews were in a state of ro'in et hanishma. They saw what was heard. Now, as you well know, you can't see things that are typically heard. You can hear them, but not see them. So spirituality is generally only heard by means of experiencing it from a distance. But when it came to Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, the Jews were elevated by God to such a degree that they literally became capable of seeing and grasping spirituality through direct perception. In other words, they were actually literally able to see what was normally heard. What's the underlying difference between seeing and hearing? It says, "Ain't Damon." You can't compare seeing to hearing. Why? Because when you hear something, if you tell this over to somebody else, or they tell you, you know what, that's not really what you heard, and they're a good orator and they can spin a story like the best of us, they might start poking holes in what you thought you heard and create doubt within your mind. But if you saw something happen with your own eyes, no one's going to be able to come over to you and tell you, no, you didn't see it. Of course I saw it. I know I saw it. Am I crazy? You're crazy. I saw it. So seeing is a much deeper level of understanding. Seeing is a much deeper level within the body. So in turn, the Jewish people at the giving of the Torah literally saw that which was heard. When God's voice boomed forth and said, "I am the Lord your God," etc., with all the rest of the commandments, they literally saw it in whatever level that's supposed to mean. What is the first word of the Ten Commandments? We get into the Ten Commandments now. We got 10 minutes. The first word is Anochi, which literally translates, or we translate it as I. What is this word Anochi? It's an odd word. It's not Hebrew. It's not Yiddish either, for that matter. It's actually Egyptian. It's an Egyptian word. And the obvious question is, why would God start the Ten Commandments with an Egyptian word? I mean, the Egyptians weren't exactly kind to us back in Egypt. And of all languages to use, there were 70 languages. Why Egyptians? It's like almost the low of the low. The Egyptians were steeped in immorality better than anyone else can do it. Why would God use the first word of the Ten Commandments as an Egyptian word? So two things. Number one, it actually our sages tell us that the word Anochi, spelled Aleph, Nun, Chaf, Yud, is an acronym. It's an acrostic for the words Anon, Nafshi, Ksavis, Yahavas. Basically, God says, I, with my essence, I wrote it, I gave it to you. So when the Torah was given to us, God literally gave us of his essence, the essence of God, which typically is not something that any physical, corporeal individual can attach themselves to. God is ethereal. God is celestial. God is infinite. We're finite. There's no way for us to be able to connect to him. The exception being through Torah, where God put his essence into the Torah so that when we study Torah, we're actually connecting to the very essence and will of God. Why the Egyptian word? So it's explained that God ultimately wanted to draw down godliness not only into Lashon Kodesh, the holy tongue of Hebrew, of biblical Hebrew, but frankly speaking, to all the languages of the world, even the Egyptian language, which I guess you can view as the lowest of the low languages in its time because of the depravity of its people. So God wanted the Torah to be manifest in every element of creation, in every language, basically to the entire universe. And in turn, he employed the first word of the Ten Commandments using an Egyptian word. How many commandments are there? There's 10 commandments, as we all know. So the sages tell us that God started with the first two commandments, I am the Lord your God, and basically then the next commandment, and then all of a sudden the Jew says, God can't handle it anymore. It's too much. Our souls are leaving us. We can't handle the voice of God. And they begged Moshe that the Moshe should say the rest. So on one hand, we're told what God told us, the Ten Commandments, not Moses. So what is that supposed to mean? So it's true. On a physical level, Moses ended up speaking the remaining 8. But somehow, mystically, in the first 2, all of the commandments were heard. It's not a physical possibility. With God, God can do anything. But beyond that, we're told that the first 2 commandments actually, within them, contain the entire Torah. How? The first commandment, I am the Lord your God, which is a positive commandment, includes in it, mystically, all 248 positive commandments. The next commandment, Lo you shall have no foreign gods or deities, etc., includes in it all 365 negative commandments. In other words, that the entire Torah was somehow manifest and heard within those first 2 commandments that God uttered. I'm not sure how much time you had on your hands, and if you ever decided to count how many letters are actually in the 10 commandments, but there are actually 620 letters in the 10 commandments. And the sages tell us that these 620 letters actually parallel the 613 biblical commandments, and the 7 mitzvot rabbanan, 7 rabbinical mitzvot, the commandments that were given to us. Just for clarity's sake, what are the 7? One of them is lighting Shabbat candles. These are of rabbinic origin. Lighting Shabbat candles, washing your hands before bread, the recitation of Hallel that we do on Jewish holidays and Rosh Chodesh, making blessings before food, and various other blessings, the mitzvot of Purim, listening to Megillah, etc., the mitzvot of Hanukkah, and lastly, that of an Eruv, where on Shabbat you're not allowed to carry in a public domain, and an Eruv is a means, in a sense, of extending a private domain, however it may be done. This is not the time to get into the laws, but all the mitzvahs of Eruv, whether it's carrying or allowing you to cook on a Friday or Yantiv, as we're doing this year for Shabbos, etc., these are all of rabbinic origin. But all of those mitzvot, the 613 biblical, the 7 rabbinical, are all included in those 620 letters of the 10 commandments. There's a lot packed into that. What is unique about the number 10? Well, 10 actually plays a very significant role in Judaism in general. First and foremost, 10 is the only complete unit, because in reality, 11 is just 10 plus 1. 12 is 12, but 10 plus 2. 20 is essentially, a factor of tens, and so on and so forth. So 10 is the only complete unit. And the number 10 plays a very central role in Judaism. If you look in Pirkei Avot, in Ethics for Fathers, the beginning of the 5th chapter, it enumerates a bunch of the different tens. I don't have time to go through all of them, but obviously there's the 10 commandments. There are the 10 utterances from which the world was created. God said, let there be light. There was light. Let there be a firmament. There was a firmament, so on and so forth, which ties into the 10 commandments. I'll try to get to that shortly. There's the 10 supernal sphirot, kind of the means by which God created the world, all the spiritual different emanations, etc. There are 10 Jews required for a minyan. There are 10 generations from Adam to Noah, 10 generations from Noah to Abraham, and there's a bunch of other 10s as well. So 10, as you get it, is a very important number. In turn, when God created the world with the 10 utterances, he said them and thus enabled the world to exist. He infused his voice, his word, let there be, into the eternal existence of everything that it was going to exist in the world. And in turn, it was brought to fruition by the 10 commandments. When God gave us those 10 commandments, it brought and brings to fruition the whole purpose of creation, the creation of the world. The commandments are divided into 5 and 5. 5 of the mitzvot are bein adam lamakom, between ourselves and God. 5 of them are between bein adam lachaver, between ourselves and man. I'm sure if I'll have the time to go through all the different connections between the two of them, but basically, if you can read the commentaries, but there's an association between commandment number 1 and number 6, and number 2 and number 7, number 3 and number 8, so on and so forth, how each one of them connects to the other. I'll just give you one example. Commandment 1 and 6, in a sense, illustrates how every human is created in the image of God. So murder, which is the 6th commandment, not to murder, is an affront to the Creator. 2 and 7 is when one worships a deity other than God. That's the 2nd commandment. And the 7th one is adultery. So it's akin to adultery, where God is our loving spouse and much more. And the same goes on with the remaining commandments as well. You have plenty of time tonight to study, to go through all of them in length. I only got 20 minutes, so I'm doing the best I can here with what I have. And I sort of want to conclude with the following concept: that the Torah that was given to us, not just the 10 commandments, but everything that it's included in the 10 commandments, was given to us 3,332 years ago. That same Torah, which had at the time 304,805 letters, 79,847 words, is exactly the same Torah we have today. Nothing has changed. There's not a letter more, there's not a letter less, there's not a word more, there's not a word less. It is exactly the same. So that Torah, which was God-given, experienced by millions of our ancestors, the only religion able to claim that, no other religion was founded by being witnessed by millions of people. It's usually one person or a group of people that heard the voice of God, had a prophecy, went into a cave, whatever the story may be. Only Judaism can claim that the same millions of people that stood at Mount Sinai heard exactly the same thing and told the same thing to their children and their grandchildren, all the way down to us. So you and I, most of us following along on this Facebook thing, Facebook Live, are descendants of those people. And in turn, we are all members of that same nation. Frankly speaking, we're members of the most exclusive club in the world. In order to get into this club, unlike other golf clubs or country clubs, this club, to get into, you got to be chosen by God to get in. or a person can convert, obviously, later on. But as members of the most exclusive club in the world, don't you think it behooves us, at the very least, to read the manual, the membership manual, the instructions, see what the benefits are? It is replete with basically the best way, the healthiest way for us to live life. We are all grandfathered in, or I guess more technically, we are all grandmothered in to this because Judaism of matrilineal descent. So in turn, we all inherited that same Torah. No Jew owns it more than the next. I implore you, over the next 48 hours, if you're outside of Israel, it's a one-day deal. But out here in California and the rest of the world, it's a 2-day deal. I implore you to take this holiday, think about it. It's sadly probably one of the least known Jewish holidays. Ironically, it is the holiday that commemorates our becoming a nation, but notwithstanding, I implore you to take this holiday, study, spend time studying, reflecting, get into it, and allow the words of Torah, the 10 Commandments, and every other commandment, all the rest of the teachings of the Torah, to permeate the very fiber of your being. Allow it to penetrate every vein, everything that exists within yourself. Become a living Torah, as we should, and this will no doubt ensure that we will be blessed with, as Hasidim typically bless each other before Shavuot. You should have Kabbalah Soter b'simcha b'pnimius. You should receive the Torah with joy. And b'pnimius means in an inward fashion. Allow it to penetrate you. And with God's help, we should be reunited with all of our loved ones in the physical, those who were standing with us at Mount Sinai with the coming of a righteous Redeemer, thus reuniting us with King David, with Moshe Rabbeinu, with our Rebbe, and all of our loved ones. B'meher v'yameinu, speedily in our days. Amen. Have a very happy Shavuos. Enjoy the fat-free cheesecake and the cheese blintzes. No doubt the gastrointestinal experience will be a great one. Good Yantiv.